We are going to be starting our Georgia O'Keeffe skulls, and there are some printouts with some skulls for you to be able to look at. We're kind of aiming for something like this, about this size. So we are going to be drawing along together, and then you'll be able to do some shading and some additional work on your own. So we're going to be starting with the top of this skull here, and we again are aiming for something this size, so you do need to leave some room at the top of your page. So I'm going to be starting with a pencil, and I am going to be doing the top of my cow's head. So I'm going to almost start with like a frowny face. Okay, so a curved line. Pay attention to how much room you have here. You want to leave enough room for your big horns to come out as well. Once I have that curved line, I'm going to go ahead and come down just a little bit more. Okay, this is where my horns are going to be coming off of. But before I do that, I want to create a line that comes out on both sides. This is kind of where his eyes are going to go. And then I'm going to start coming back down again. From there, I'm going to make a line that's going to come down. Not all the way to the bottom of the paper, but you can go ahead and go across. It's kind of like an ice cream cone bottom. Almost looks like an ice cream cone, actually. Now I can go ahead and add my horns. So they're going to come out, and then they're going to start to curve up. They're not very sharp. They have a kind of a blunt point on them. And they get wider as they come back to the head. You'll notice when I am drawing this out, I'm sketching a lot. That's short little lines, so that you don't have to do a continuous line. And then, of course, if you don't like anything, as long as you're drawing lightly, you can easily erase and fix. Anything you don't like. You'll notice the horns coming in right above that bump where we went out, because that's where his eyes are, so the horns need to be above that. They need to end above that. And you can always make edits. You can always make them later, too. You don't have to do them right now. Then I'm going to come in and I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a jagged, not perfectly straight line for his eyes. The eyes is just a socket because this is a skull, so there's no eyes in it. Now I'm going to do some work on the bone, the designs on the bone that you might be seeing on a skull. So we're going to do kind of a jagged line. Jagged means it's not perfectly straight. It's not perfect. All the way down. And then there's some other marks on the skull, and again, you'll notice when you look at the design on the actual artwork at your table, it's kind of making like a W right here. Okay. And then there's some lines that come out from the eyes, again, some jagged lines that are connecting over here. You can do that on each one, coming from about the middle of the eye socket and then the bottom. And they don't need to match. They're not symmetrical. They are asymmetrical. And when you look at the skull image, you're going to see that this is a little more curved in and it comes out. So you can change that. We did kind of a straight line, but we can go back. And because we're drawing lightly, we can come back and change the shape anywhere we need to. Just erase what you want to change the shape of. And then also you're going to notice that it's obviously not a straight across here. It's kind of like a big W again. We saw a little W up here, so there's a bigger W out here. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to edit that, add that little mark that comes up here, and erase the area that I don't need. And you'll see that this is hollow straight through. That's where his nasal cavity would have been. So I want to go ahead and add those kind of lines, or almost like an oval shape. In there. And that's really kind of our basic outline. There's some little divots in here that if you want to make sure you get those, you can. You can look at the texture that it's got on the horns if you want to go ahead and start mapping some of that out, which you can see when you look at the horns that they kind of bulge out a little more here. So you can go back and fix shapes, change lines, add those little divots just so we know where they're going to go. This is not close to finished yet. This is your basic sketch. And if you have any other little lines you want to add to make it more realistic, like this is where it's going to be darker because you're looking kind of into the cavern of the nose. And again, draw really lightly so that you can easily erase. This is all about observation for you. This is looking at something and trying to draw what you see, which is what we did on our last project, but this is just a little more advanced than what we did in the last project. And once you finish that, you are going to be ready to start some shading, and we're going to be using these ebony pencils for starting to add some value and shading into our artwork. That means the darks and the lights. So I'm going to go into these eye sockets first, and I'm going to start adding the dark in there because these are hollow. The harder you press, the darker it will be. I want to darken some of these lines up. Now that I'm happy with them and I'm sure that I want to keep them, now it's the time to go ahead and darken them up. And again, these are jagged, so don't make them perfectly straight. When you look at the artwork or the picture of the skull that we are using for drawing purposes, you'll also notice that some of the areas are wider. So you can widen that line just by kind of coloring it in a little. Okay, so just parts of it, not all of it. Up here you'll be able to look at that picture and see that it's a little darker. Right now we're just darkening up our lines, coloring in our really dark spots that we know are going to be colored in all the way. Please remember to color in one direction. Remember, those oval shapes are straight through the back, so there shouldn't be any shading in those because they're looking through, but back here is like deeper into the skull, but it doesn't look all the way through, so it's darker. And you can do some shading in there to show that. And I'm going to work on my horns in a little bit, but right now I'm going to start to go in and add some shading. I want to use some value to create some more dimension to this. So if you look at the skull picture, you can see some shading here, some shading here. Okay, so look for the different whites and gray values, and we're going to use that to create our own. Remember, the harder you push, the darker it gets. So if you're trying to do some shading up here, I'm going to press really lightly because I don't want to go too crazy. And with this ebony pencil, we should be able to do some work with our finger to kind of blend it in. So once you get kind of the area that you wanted to shade, and you'll see how lightly I'm not really pressing, and I'm kind of using the side of my pencil here. Then I can go in with my finger and I can blend it. That looks pretty good. And I can see some shading coming up this way. Kind of connects there. And then just go ahead and blend it. I'm just going to keep doing that and trying to make my drawing a little more realistic. You just got to keep working on it. And this ebony pencil should also be able to be erased similar to a regular pencil. It's just a little bit different kind of lead for you to work with. It's a little for more advanced drawing and shading. Okay, so I'm just going in, adding anywhere that I see that I think the shading is going to make it more realistic. Guys, I'm hardly pressing on this pencil, just so you know. Hardly at all. But if you feel like it's not pressing hard enough, then you can put a little more pressure behind your hand. But I would practice with your pressure if you need to, if you're not feeling comfortable. Practice creating some value before you do the work on your final drawing. And then you can always go back in and darken up areas if you want to. Once you kind of finish what you want your skull to look like, you can go in and start adding some of the texture and details that you see on the horns, which it's got some ridges here that you might want to add in. And the horns are really dark, so it's the darkest thing other than the holes in the skull. So you're going to want to start, this is going to be kind of lighter, so that you can still see those ridges once you blend it. So it's like a medium pressure. Remember, you can practice your pressure. And again, you're going to be blending here. And then it's going to get darker as it goes up. Remember, you're coloring in small areas. Don't try to color across the whole horn. That's just going to look sloppy. So I would color a nice small area. Make sure it's got really good coverage. Use your blending. And then keep moving up. that's kind of the look we're going for, and you'll just continue to work until you feel really good about your final drawing, and I will be available to help anybody that needs assistance. Just let me know. And I think these are going to be amazing Georgia O'Keeffe inspired cow skulls.